Excellent. So we're recording. So welcome. I have two former students, and I have Katie with me. Katie Han, she's a communication arts major and English major, and she's minoring in Spanish, maybe majoring too. And she's hoping to get into a journalism career. So this is a great, I'm so happy you reached out and we can do this together. And our guests tonight are um, Dan Hood, who graduated from W&J in 2011 with a Spanish major and a chem minor. And he is currently a manager at Eagle Hill Consulting. And one of your the clients you work with is the Food and Drug Administration. And on the other side, we have Korey, who graduated in 2013 with an international studies major and also Spanish major. And he's now a public affairs specialist and the communications officer at the U.S. Forest Service. So we're going to start at the beginning, maybe when you guys were at W&J. Do you remember why you chose to do either a double major or a major and the chem minor? How did that start? What was your thinking? So let's start with Dan, if you want.
Sure. Yeah. Thanks for having me. Excited to talk with all of you here tonight. So while I was at W&J, I was kind of all over the place. I think I started when I, first arrived, I was like, I'm going to be international business major, then decided, oh, let's go pre-med, and went down that route. And then, also was a big, language was always something that was very important to me. I had the travel bug from a young age, but I hadn't done a lot of travel. And so getting into languages and furthering my Spanish was really important to me. So when I arrived at W&J, I knew that definitely wanted to pursue the Spanish major, and then was trying to figure out the other pieces. And then for some reason, I realized that I was taking so many chem and bio classes that I needed like one extra class for a minor. So I was just like, screw it, let's do it. Why not? Just what's one more class? And so that's kind of the route that I took. And going just a little bit further, and I won't go too far, like right after graduation, I realized, no, medicine is not for me. Like I was all prepped. I got the MCAT book and I was like, I hate this. And there's nothing being pre-med. Like, I mean, I have doctors in the family, but I was just sort of like, if I don't love this, like, don't do it. Don't go into like another couple $100,000 in debt for medical school and all of that if I'm not really passionate about it. So then later I can talk about the path that I took to get where I am today. But yeah, so then settled with the Spanish major and the chem minor.
It's funny how it was almost by chance. It's like, oh, I have all these, like science courses. Mm-hmm. What about you, Korey?
So first off, thanks so much, Professor Pañez, for inviting us to talk to the students today. It's actually one of my favorite things to do, is to chat with students and young people who are thinking about their careers. I myself am a first-generation college graduate, no doctors in my family, unfortunately. But my walk with Spanish has been a long one. When I was 17, I moved to Spain. Very, very fortunate to do so. I lived in Zaragoza, in Aragon, in the Northeast, and that was my second home. Still is, love it there. Haven't been back in a while, but I miss it. So coming to W&J and majoring in Spanish was basically a given that I was going to major in Spanish while I was there. And that's, not only for my love for Spanish, but also because I really wanted to pursue an international career. And for a lot of international careers, being bilingual is a baseline. And I am still maintain that that's still the case from what I see. And so when I was at W&J, I quickly developed a relationship with Professor Manzari, with Alpañez, and with a few others. And it was a natural fit for me for a lot of reasons. But then I quickly realized that the professors there are amazing. Bar none, they're some of the best professors at W&J. And so I quickly hopped on board with the major and never looked back. It was an amazing experience. I built a lot of skills at W&J. I got a second trip to Spain out of it. Spent another 10-ish months in Pamplona and back in Zaragoza. And it that's kind of my walk with Spanish at W&J. I was also international affairs major because I had a strong drive to get into public service, particularly civically minded person. I wanted to work for the government in some form or capacity, and international studies, obviously, very government oriented degree. So those two things kind of came hand in hand for me. Yeah, but that's a little bit about my background.
Awesome. So, how would you both describe what allowed you to manage to work so well while doing both disciplines?
I'll punt this to Dan first.
That would be while you were at W&J. We're still at W&J. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, still at
How
W&J.
did you manage both?
I think, you know, a lot of it comes down to time management and understanding, you know, like what your priorities are. It can be difficult, you know, with, especially when you're thinking of language or business or communications, or so many, like they can be very different in like their nature, especially if you're going down the science route. Like just they use different parts of your brain, and your thinking skills are slightly different. But I think of it as, you know, like time management is so key to make sure that you know, build up your time to be able to, you know, focus on different different areas, get your studies in. But also like I really enjoy being able to do that because it's almost like a break from each piece and being able to, you know, continue to learn in multiple different areas. And so for me, like it's really just about like gathering all the information that you can, and it's tough, but it's definitely doable. And, you know, it just takes a little bit of planning on the front end.
So, and I gotta apologize, Dan, I won't make you take the first position
all
on every
good.
one of these questions, but give me a little time to think about the question. So at the end of the day, you're at W&J, you're getting a liberal arts education. I am a generalist. I am not a specialist by any stretch of the imagination, and that has served me well in my career and in my academic path. I like to learn a lot about, I like to get sort of medium deep on a lot of topics rather than dive like my whole life on one topic. And so that was natural. And then of course, like if you're in international affairs, international studies, that really gels well with another language. I think actually it's a requirement now. If you're in international affairs, you need to double major. I don't remember. I don't know exactly, but there was murmuring about that while I was there. And so I hope that's the case because it's important. And so it worked well. It was a lot though. I'll say I put 100% into my degree at W&J. I studied a lot. And I was a little all over I like to say I was all over the globe because in international studies, I had a focus in East Asia. So I was also studying Japanese while I was there for a bit. And so I had like Latin America, Europe, and Asia, and the United States covered. So a little shamefully, but it's spread too thin, honestly. I was spread too thin. I needed to pick a region.
You know, I think that if you were here and you enjoy the classes and you were enjoying learning about as much as you could, oh well, you know, you'll take a break later, you know, take the opportunity while you're here. And Korey, you went into something that I wanted to ask, and it is true that it's very easy to see how the connection between foreign languages and international studies is, and they go back in like hand in hand. They don't have a requirement if you major in one, you major in the other, but it's so natural that many international studies majors major in another language or minor in another language. It's kind of, you know, makes sense. What they do, and this was pre-COVID and hopefully post-COVID too, is that both majors require study abroad, and you can count the same study abroad for both. So that, you know, if you only want to be abroad for one semester, that's...
Or you can make students go abroad twice, I mean.
Or more, why not? I mean, you were abroad for like a year. You know, you didn't want to come back, and we'll discuss study abroad in a minute. Dan, do you see a connection between, in terms of skills that come together or ways of learning that help each other in the two disciplines you were studying, chemistry and Spanish? Do you see it? How did that combine? Were they complementary in any way?
Yeah, I mean, I'd probably actually have to say that they aren't very complementary in my experience. The chemistry was very separated out from, especially from what I do today. But what it did was it allowed, like, especially language learning, just makes you think in a different way and opens your mind to, other ways of thinking. So like thinking of like my own study abroad experiences and getting involved with, learning different cultures and understanding that just because you're in southwestern Pennsylvania, that's not the only point of view of the world. And being able to expand your mind and thinking through language is such a benefit through my professional career. Being able to try and see things from somebody else's perspective and really just relating to people who are different or speak a different language and valuing their input has been so instrumental to everything that I do.
So while you guys were studying such a broad variety of topics, did you ever feel any pressure from peers or professionals or even just friends to kind of narrow down your focus and focus on only one discipline? And if so, how did you manage that?
I can hop in first, Dan, give you a chance to think a little bit.
Perfect.
I can't say that but yeah, I did. I think people told me like, Korey, why don't you focus on one thing? But when you're in college, like that's really the opportunity. There's really no reason not to try a lot of different things. You still have that flexibility to do so. And you're building a lot of soft skills that are going to be a lot more important than some of those technical skills that you might learn, except for writing, which we can talk about later. So writing is a hard skill. It's like the most important skill, one of the most important skills I have in both Spanish and English. But anyway, I didn't get a ton of pressure. You get the occasional pre-med student that kind of rolls their eyes at you about all the different things you're doing and how much they're struggling through their studies. I can't say that though I was wrong. I think spreading a broad base, casting a wide net, learning as much as I can, really getting the value out of W&J, squeezing as much out of that as experience as I could. Don't regret it for a minute. I think that was the right way for me to take it, particularly for my learning type.
Yeah, and I just have to agree with that. Like I think if anything, I'd probably put more pressure on myself to try to figure out what I wanted to do with my life. Like there I was flipping between chemistry and Spanish and trying to figure out like, what does my career look like if I'm not going to go to med school? And like, so it was more like just a more personal introspection of like, all right, so like, I love learning all these things. I love all these different things. Like, I know I have to eventually pick one, or like just go down some path. Whether it's the ultimate path that I go down, but just being open to like trusting my gut and going down to where I've been today. And I'm sure we'll get into it, but like I did go to grad school and like I had a lot of different experiences along my path that have really it's not been a straight line, but while that may not at the time have felt like, oh yeah, I know exactly what I want to do. I want to go get my MBA or I want to go and be a lawyer or whatever. Like I was never like that. I'm so happy with where I am today that I would not be here if it weren't for the, wide range of things that I was interested and studied along the way.
Then I think you're, and I told you earlier, and I repeated, we're going to go a little back and forth because these are the quality of my questions. But I heard a little bit in your answers about what majoring in Spanish has brought you, and you've mentioned professionally, and I want to, like give you more time to elaborate on both professionally and personally. What did majoring in a language bring to you? And I promise the question about study abroad is coming, although you can mention it, but you can be broader too. So who wants to start?
Yeah, I can go ahead. That's all right. I actually took a few notes on this very question because I think it's an important one. So I got a few points. I'll try to make this as like concise as possible. Is first off, this is to underscore Dan's point earlier that learning a second language has helped me to better understand people. I would say it was super formative in my life, getting a level of fluency in Spanish. It's definitely made me a better writer and a better storyteller. My job's all about writing. It's all about telling stories. you learn to appreciate language in a new way that you simply don't do when you're monolingual. I'm from Western Maine. There are a few French speakers, but I remember the moment in my life when I realized people thought in other languages. I wasn't that young, and it blew my mind. And so if I cannot imagine had I had maintained that very narrow perspective on the world, and Spanish blew the doors right off that. So it's made me a better storyteller. It's made me better at empathizing with others. I've got a newfound appreciation for like expressions and how you paint pictures of things. Spanish in Aragon is very colorful, and I bring some of that color to when I express myself in English when I write, or at least I try to. English is not as expressive as Spanish. I'd say that I find many people who study languages and who also pursue careers in government they're looking for international opportunities, and that's just a baseline. Like being able to speak another language pretty well, that's a baseline requirement for a lot of those things. So that satisfied that baseline for me over and over and over again. It's been like money in the bank. Like I could just pull on that. It's been huge for me professionally for that reason. You also never know which element of your personal story and your career and academic development is going to be the thing that helps you land those first couple of career breaks. Spanish, it wasn't it for me, honestly. That's not what got me the job I'm in currently, but it has been huge. It's been enormous when it comes to finding new opportunities once I got my foot in the door. So I got a call randomly from Forest Service Office International Programs, and they're like, hey, we'd like to send you to Peru to work with the Peruvian Forest Service. Unfortunately, I was on a detail outside of the Forest Service at the time. I couldn't take advantage of it. But again, like speaking Spanish paid dividends, and I wasn't even aware. Like basically word on the street got around that I spoke Spanish and they wanted to send me. So it's paid me back over and over and over again, the ability to speak Spanish. And that's what it's brought to me professionally. I mean, I could talk personally, but those are some big points.
Then you're gonna want to go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, I think I would just echo what I said earlier and what Korey just said. It opens so many doors, and whether it's, that first interview, a side story, and you're talking with someone who was also a Spanish major, or, also experienced a similar, experience abroad or something like that. All of those pieces just build up your whole picture and like who you are, and not just on like getting interviews and things like that, but it's a mindset change that you can really end up connecting with other people on, and those connections are just so valuable.
Excellent.
So I know that you guys both covered this honestly pretty thoroughly with that last explanation. Korey mentioned a lot just about how it talks about it helps with storytelling and it helps with understanding other experiences, but is there any particular thing that you would pinpoint, skills, experience, and especially work habits that you may have learned from even just studying language in general that is important to your job today? Like more particular things that have helped professionally?
I think for me, it's really, especially if I work with the FDA, it is such an international agency. There are people from all over the world doing incredible and very important work these days. And knowing that, like, being able to relate to individuals there because you know another language, whether you're actually speaking to them in another language or not, that's not the point, but that you're able to respect them and know how to interact and understand that people bring different cultural differences to the table, and that maybe they aren't, very, rosy and outgoing like Americans tend to be, but that's okay. That doesn't mean that they're not invested in the conversation or the work that you're doing with them. And so there's so many things like that where just having that ability to going back to like think differently and understand that they are thinking differently is just immeasurable.
The first thing that comes to mind, and I'm sorry, this isn't exactly encouraging, but it's important. Learning, being a monolingual, I was very much monolingual growing up, and it wasn't even monolingual. It's like we spoke like Maine English. I don't know if you've ever heard it, but it's not really English. So I grew up speaking that way, and then I moved to Spain and learned how to speak Spanish when I was young. And I go back to this, I say, learning another language is suffering. Like Buddha had it wrong. Like it's not living, it is suffering. You got to put yourself out there. You got to be uncomfortable. You have to embarrass yourself over and over and over again. You got to say the wrong thing. I mean, any Spanish student, the first time they say like, estoy embarazado, they're like, what? You know, like it's a classic example, but like, but you're going to make a fool out of yourself. But guess what? Like that's not just true for language, right? Like, I'm a terrible public speaker. I am awful. It's one of the hardest things for me on the planet. And but learning Spanish helped me to reinforce these skills. And so also being meticulous, you know, persevering, not giving up, you know, knowing that you got to put the time and the effort in. I mean, those are just the work ethic of learning another language really helped me progress in my own career. So.
Korey, I find it hard to believe that you're not a good public speaker.
Yeah.
No, I'm
like,
not.
what is he saying?
I'm really not.
Could you tell
Not
us,
naturally.
we were mentioning this earlier at the beginning, could you tell us your path from the moment you graduate at W&J until where you are now? Did you go to school? Were you abroad? What other jobs did you do? How did those jobs happen? Did you look for them? Dan, you want to go over it?
Sure. Yes, so I graduated W&J in 2011, and that was when I was doing my nope, not doing med school, need to figure some stuff out. So I actually moved home for about a year. It was not easy, that's for sure, trying to figure out what I wanted to do. I just was, working in an office, not the most exciting work, but during that year, I reached out to other W&J students and W&J friends to kind of just start picking their brains, because I actually kind of regretted not going down the international affairs, international relations path while I was at W&J. So I was looking for a way to get back into that, because I knew that I really enjoyed that kind of work. So I actually connected with someone who at the time was teaching English in Hong Kong, and she was in the process of applying to grad school programs. And she mentioned that there were some grad school fairs in DC. APSIA, I think, was the group. And so I just came down to DC and, met up with, talked with a bunch of different people about different programs. And then ended up applying to a bunch. I forget, I think 5 different programs that I was looking at. And I ended up being accepted into Johns Hopkins School of Advanced International Studies. And the program within that I was accepted to was, they actually have a campus in Bologna, Italy. So I was able to move to Bologna, Italy for a year. So it's 1 year in Italy and then 1 year in DC. So you're actually never at the Baltimore campus. So yes, I graduated from Hopkins, but never stepped foot there, unfortunately. So I did a year in Italy and a year in DC. And while I was there, I focused on international studies and international economics. So it's also kind of a generalist program. There's a lot of different paths that you can go down, but was able to really dive deeper into European history, European economics, political, social events, all of the above. And it's where I met some of my best friends, both from being this English speaking cohort, even though it was 50% international students and 50% American students. Met some of my best friends in this cohort and have remained close to this day. So when I moved back to DC for my second year, I graduated, and I actually ended up getting my first job. I knew I wanted to go into some sort of consulting world. I really like being able to learn new things. It's not just the same thing every day. And so the consulting world, especially in DC, you get to work with a lot of different agencies or, different, just centers and different things related to that. I ended up getting a job at the Advisory Board Company, which is actually a healthcare research and consulting firm. So it wasn't exactly what I wanted, but they did have an international arm. And so I started with domestic research and was researching how hospitals can improve their functions and things like that. But eventually did move over to the international team there. So was working with hospitals in Australia, in the UK, mainland Europe, and so was able to get some of that experience as well, and talking with different individuals around the world, which was really really fun and a great experience. I was there for about just under 3 years, and after that I realized that while I was at the advisory board, I was really focusing on just the research part. So I was doing all understanding problems, figuring out how to solve them, but I wasn't actually helping to implement the solution that I was coming up with. And that was something that I really wanted to get back to. Interacting with clients, helping them understand their own problems and helping them solve them, and then seeing it through to success. So I looked around DC and talked with some friends, and then stumbled upon my current company, Eagle Hill Consulting, which is mostly federal consulting. So it's about 90% federal. There are a couple commercial clients, but it's a really, it's about a 200 person firm. So it's not massive. It's not the BCG, Bain, McKinsey world. But it's a really, great place to grow all of those client delivery skills, client interaction, solving problems, going all these different directions. It is mostly domestic work, but like I mentioned, my current client, and it's been my client for about 2 years now, is the FDA, so the Food and Drug Administration. So I've bumped around on a lot of different projects within the agency, and have had the opportunity to help implement new programs, or start new teams, and figure out like the business side of how they function. I like to say that the FDA, like, it makes sense why there's a lot of consultants there, because they're all scientists. Like, they are incredibly smart scientists. They're the ones coming up with COVID stuff, and like, they should not be focused on how to run the business side of the FDA. They are the PhD level individuals. And so I help them out on, making sure that their meetings run smoothly, making sure that like they're set up for success, so that when they go in to do the science, that like they are set up for success, and they don't have to worry about kind of the background noise and those sorts of pieces. I know I just kind of rambled on for a bit.
No, that's excellent. I had forgotten for a minute that you were in Bologna for forever. So
Yeah.
do you speak Spanish and English and Italian, all three?
Well, so it's actually kind of funny. So, and I didn't mention earlier, but I did spend a year while I was at W&J in Pamplona. So I was there and absolutely loved it. And then, so moved to Bologna. All the classes were in English, but I was required to teach language.
Okay.
While I started out with Italian over like a summer crash course, because I was studying European studies at the time, it actually made more sense to study French. So I studied French while I was in Italy, but then used my Spanish to get around, because Spanish and Italian
Are very close.
Very mutually and like understandable between the two. So I like to say that Spanish is my best language. French is probably the second one, and I can get by with Italian because you just change comunicazione to comunicazione, and it's just like there's 10,000 words right there that you have in Italian.
That's excellent. Korey, how did you end up at the U.S. Forest Service?
Well, before I talk, it's a very long and meandering, but I first want to say, Dan, thanks for sharing your story. It's super interesting to see the different paths that people take in their careers. And one of the major takeaways I want to say before I go into any meandering, like sort of and wax about my life up till leaving W&J till now, is that casting a wide net, taking advantage of the opportunities that are given to you. Don't be too married to one idea of what you want to do, because you don't even know what you don't know. Like the amount of opportunities out there, how deep some of this stuff goes, it's unbelievable. Absolutely. What I would have told you I wanted to do, it's actually not too far off what I'm doing right now, but like the stuff I've seen in between is crazy compared to 2013 and today. So don't be discouraged. I felt that insecurity leaving W&J. Like I said, I was a first generation college student. I was like, my safety net is I move back to Maine and I work construction. That never happened for me, but I didn't have to fall back on that. And with an education at W&J, if you take advantage of everything, you won't either. So anyway, with all that being said, how I got at the Forest Service, and very interesting story. I have to explain it a lot if you look at my career. So I left W&J in 2013. I cast a super wide net, primarily teaching abroad opportunities. Again, you have to cut your teeth somewhere in the international space, and teaching abroad is an easy way to do it. Lots of people do it that way. I kind of had my sights set on either the State Department as a Foreign Service officer, or in the intelligence community somewhere. And then when I went, I applied to a bunch of stuff, got into a couple programs. I got into JET to teach in Japan, and I got into Fulbright Korea. And so actually at that time, my classmate and I, Jake Reese, I believe his name is.
Oh, I remember.
Yeah, we were the first people at W&J to get Fulbright in like 20 years, something crazy like that. So it was it was total luck. There's so much luck involved. You just kind of cast the dice and hope for the best. I don't know how they picked it, but somehow I slipped through. Jake's probably very qualified. I wasn't. So, so I moved to Korea. I loved it. Lived there for 3 years. My Korean is passable at best. It was the best after the first year when I was living with a homestay family, but Korean is super hard, like Spanish. It's super, super hard. And but I loved Korea. I loved teaching there. I was a middle school teacher. I taught 600 students a week, 23 classes a week, 23 class hours a week. It was amazing and it was so hard. And I learned so much by being a teacher. The soft skills you develop being a teacher, I have such a newfound and profound respect for teachers because the skills you learn are just amazing. So spent 3 years doing that. Worked a lot with the State Department, and that made me want to kind of double down on the State Department. I'm like, that's where I'm headed. I'm going to be an FSO. That's what I'm doing. I applied to a lot of the same schools Dan probably did. I looked at SAIS, that's Johns Hopkins School of International Studies. I looked at schools in Europe. I looked at schools in Spain. I applied all over the place, again, casting a wide net. When I was coming out of the Fulbright program. And then I ended up settling on the Fletcher School of Law and Diplomacy and Tufts in Boston, mostly to be close to home because I'd been away for such a long time. And that was a great choice. Fletcher's an amazing school. If any of you are interested in international affairs, it's a great graduate school. I was there, and that's when I started to develop some communication chops. I landed an internship with the State Department first, in their narcotics and law enforcement affairs. That's again kind of getting back to that hard national security space. But this is a good lesson in don't marry one idea, because my security clearance didn't go through in time. Lo and behold, you spend a couple of years abroad and your security clearance takes a while. So I had a backup, and that was interning for my senator, Angus King, independent from Maine, fantastic individual. And I got to work in his press office, and it wasn't glamorous. Very, very early morning doing press clips. I got to work on some cool stuff in his office, but I really got some hard communication skills there. It's similar to like a press education, but you're on the government side. It's public affairs.
Mhm.
And so I got some experience in there. And then again, casting a really wide net, I got the Presidential Management Fellowship program. So for all of you who are very interested in the federal government and working in the federal government, well, let me backtrack. By the way, this is 2016, so just FYI. The outlook at the State Department was looking pretty bleak. Hiring freezes, they weren't taking anybody. People were leaving the State Department en masse in 2017, 2018, around the time I was finishing grad school. So I was like, State Department does not look like a good place to try to land right now. You gotta kind of test the air and see where things are at. But it's really hard to get a federal job. Like, it's stupid hard. To get hired as a federal employee, it's just, there are a lot of, I work with a lot of Dan's colleagues, maybe not from his company specifically, but consultants and contractors who come in the government. It's a much easier way to get in the government and do government work. I got really lucky and got the PMF program, which put me on a special hiring track. Again, casting a super wide net, I applied for jobs all over the federal government. I had an amazing interview with someone in the Forest Service who works in public affairs, who also did a lot of the same things I did. Spent a year in Pamplona. We really hit it off there because we were able to share that experience. Yeah, and I ended up getting the job offer at the Forest Service. And so, and if I may, a big takeaway from joining the Forest Service and not being married to the idea of the State Department is, if you're interested in international affairs, almost every major agency or department in the federal government does international affairs. The State Department is not the end-all be-all.
Only one.
No, not even close. Forest Service International, we have a Forest Service International programs. They get most of their funding from USAID, and we send people abroad to do projects all over. We're the world premier agency in forest conservation. And so we're a big scientific agency. We do a lot of work. We send a lot of people abroad to share in that expertise and to be a good global neighbor. So, so anyway, my career path, in summation, very long, very meandering. But there's been some really amazing opportunities along the way. So the big takeaways are like casting a wide net and not being married to sort of one outcome. Because
How long have you been with the Forest Service?
so I joined the Forest Service back when I graduated in 2018. I spent 6 months on a developmental detail with the Coast Guard, U.S. Coast Guard, and their Office of International Affairs and Foreign Policy. And then, so out of 2.5 years, about 2 years, I've been with the Forest Service.
See, if you hadn't mentioned, and I saw that Dan was nodding because he understands this too, that, you know, there are many agencies and many government, you know, places that you can get a job that is connected to international. I would have thought no, you know, until you mentioned it. And I'm like, duh, yeah, makes sense. Fascinating. Katie, you want to go ahead?
Yeah, of course. I just wanted to thank you guys for both sharing those stories because they're incredible experiences. But would you be willing to go a little bit further into just what your current job entails more specifically and what kind of things you would do on a typical day?
Sure. Yeah, I'm happy to hop in first. So like I mentioned, I work for a consulting firm and most of our clients are the federal government. And so in my case, like I mentioned, I work with the FDA. There's so many different types of projects I could be staffed on, whether it's a strategy project, helping, you know, a team figure out like their mission and, you know, brainstorming with them and coming up with those types of ideas. Or maybe it's more process improvement. You know, they've identified that something needs to be done better and they just need the extra brain power to start thinking through what different ways can we improve our current ways of operating. Or one of my projects that I'm slightly connected to, they're trying to do a reorganization of one of the a 1,500 person sub office within FDA. How do you do that? What do you need to be considering? How will this impact people? The main thing that I do that sounds kind of nebulous, but it's actually something that I've really started to enjoy is called change management. So how do you help people through major changes? Because you can't just go in and say, nope, we're reorging 1,500 people. Now you're reporting to this person and this person. Like that's going to cause a lot of disruption. There's a lot of communications that need to be built out for that. There's a lot of training that needs to go into it. There's the whole strategy of preparing for it. And a lot of these initiatives can take many years to really be rolled out. So in my case right now, my current project, I actually work with a team called the Emerging Technology Team. And so they work with, you know, when the FDA doesn't know how to regulate something because it's, you know, the pharmaceutical industry is coming up with it, it's brand new, the FDA doesn't know how to regulate it. And so this team, it's a special subgroup of scientists who kind of work, you know, on these technologies to figure out like how, like, what do we do? Like we need to figure out how to regulate it. Well, it's a kind of a new team. And so what I've been charged with coming in is to help them figure out like, how do we build this team up? Because it's all volunteer time. It's people doing things on top of their day job. And so making it more of a cemented program within the agency, making sure that there are systems in place for how does the pharmaceutical industry interact with these individuals? What are the timelines that they need to be abiding by? How do we, you know, make sure that this team, you know, when they figure out how to regulate it, they need to what we call graduate it out of this program. How do you teach the regular regulators how to do this? So I'm in charge with helping them build this program up to figure out like, well, what is the way to transfer this knowledge to a different group of people? How do we do it? Where are we storing this information? How do we track it? How can we come up with these metrics and different ideas so that they can figure out like, hey, like, are we being successful? Are we not being successful? So like, that's a little bit broader, but like on a day-to-day, you know, I have a couple people that report to me so it's like a 3-person team that we work with together to make sure that, you know, whether we're, you know, drafting communications plans or, you know, interviewing stakeholders to understand their daily job to make sure that like, what do we need to do? We're working with the scientists to come up with training programs. And so there's a lot of different things that day-to-day really changes.
Korey?
Sure. And Dan, you just triggered me with change management.
A lot of people get, yep. I understand your reaction.
Yeah, it's hugely important, and we're constantly in flux, and we're constantly changing organizations and trying to make things more efficient and more effective in the government. And so it's a real thing. It's real hard, and it's very hard. So I work in public affairs. I'm what they call a public affairs specialist. And so not to boil it down to sounding too romantic, but essentially I'm a storyteller. My job is to hunt out, understand the Forest Service, and tell our stories to the American public and let the public know what our value is. It's actually super similar to diplomacy. We're a big country, a very big and diverse country with varying views on the same issues. And so my job is to message those issues across audiences. And it's really interesting. Speaking about Spanish, our country has millions of Spanish-speaking citizens, millions of Spanish-speaking citizens, and I would argue the federal government doesn't do the job it should to. And by the way, this is Korey, not the Forest Service. We don't do the job maybe we should to make sure that those messages land in those Spanish-speaking communities in the language that they understand. So that's a thing. And so. I'm a storyteller at the end of the day. My job is a lot of writing. Writing skills is super important. The Office of Communication, we manage the Forest Service digital web presence. We manage the Forest Service's social media accounts. My personal portfolio has to do with shared stewardship, which is a fancy term for how the Forest Service works with state, local governments, tribal authorities, tribal governments, huge player in this arena. To get our work done. And the Forest Service mission is insane. It's huge. We do so much stuff. We do everything from grazing permits, ranchers putting their cattle out to graze on federal land, to tree harvesting, to outdoor recreation. People often confuse us with the Park Service. We kind of hide behind them because everyone loves the Park Service. But we're very different than the Park Service. The Park Service is all about recreation. Recreation is only a tiny part of what we do. We do everything from oil and gas extraction to timber harvesting. I've been changing the pictures. Firefighting is You guys probably heard a ton about the fires in Colorado and California, New Mexico. That's not new. The fires have been burning on the American landscape since well before white settlers here, well before human settlement was in North America, probably. So fire has been really important as part of our story. And so day to day, my job is to tell that story primarily through writing. And for a generalist like me, it's the perfect job. Because 1 minute I'm on the phone with a forest ecologist, someone who spent their entire career as a specialist learning about how trees grow. The next minute I'm on the phone with international programs talking about the political and social climate in Peru. It really does. The sky's the limit in terms of what I want to work on a given day. So it's pretty cool. It's really cool. If I'm like sparking anybody's interest in the agency, like please let me know. That's just one federal agency. The federal government does so much stuff across all of our agencies.
That's awesome.
Yep, a lot of writing. It's a lot of writing, and so I would advocate for learning to write well.
I was thinking that maybe your experience teaching in Korea also helped you become a better storyteller and a better writer. When you're teaching others, you kind of see things more clearly because you're less, you're not fighting for a grade. And then you're like, that's not very good writing.
Yeah.
And then you can learn yourself from that. You probably did at some point.
Yeah, well, it's all about audiences, right? And delivering information the way that the people you're talking to need that information. So I could get a forest ecologist on the phone and you guys will not be interested in the Forest Service at all because you're not forest ecologists.
No,
Like you don't
understand.
Exactly. And so you need to tell things in a way that resonates with your audience. So, you got to gauge who you're talking to. And like teaching a classroom of 35 middle schoolers, like
you have to do that very hard.
Yeah, exactly.
Hey,
I would just like to jump in and just say, like, I completely echo that with like understanding your audience and like communications, no matter what you're doing, whether you're in Korey's position where it's like, that's your job is writing communications and doing that work. Or like in my case with a client who like, I need to be able to communicate to that individual to make sure that they understand what is going on, or to like also understand what they need to tell me. And so it's like communication, no matter whether it's your primary job or just like a subset of it, so important.
And it's beautiful how it ties with Katie's plan too. You know, you're 100% in this world of communicating, understanding your audience, writing. I just a side note for Korey. I don't know if you know this podcast from NPR. It's called Shortwave.
Mm-hmm.
You know, if you've heard it, they did a great episode about the fires. I found
Mm-hmm.
it fascinating. It's like a 10-minute thing about science, and I love the one about fires. I learned a lot.
I'm a huge NPR listener. If you're interested in international affairs, I recommend listening to NPR every day. That's probably your best training for the Foreign Service Officer exam. But there's another one. It's called Timber Wars in Oregon, and it's this amazingly produced podcast about like conflict between people who harvest trees for a living and then environmental conservation groups. And a lot of these issues, a lot of these conflicts, you know, we're a country of 50 states with unique jurisdictions, with unique authorities. It looks really similar to international affairs when you start talking about, like, you know, the ability for states to do things and when can the federal government come in, and it gets really complicated. And for a government person like me who's kind of
That's
a
awesome.
poli-sci nerd, yeah, it's great. Anyway, sorry, talk too much.
No, that's fine. I was going to ask about, this is the study abroad question. You guys were, while at W&J, both in Pamplona. How was it? Why did you choose it? What did you learn? Anything you can tell me about it?
Sure. Yeah, so when I went to college, it didn't matter where I went to college, I knew I was studying abroad. Like, it was like 100%, it was always something that I knew that I was going to do. And so I think like my first week at W&J, I like immediately went to like the study abroad office and was like, all right, I need to I know I need to plan this. So like, let's figure this out. I didn't make any decisions that day, but definitely started working through that. And very quickly, I realized that what I really wanted was a fully immersive experience. I really did not want to go study abroad and speak English and hang out with all of the Americans and just kind of be, you know, like a party trip abroad for however long I was going to be gone. So I knew also I had never been to Europe at that point. And so I was like, I want to go to Europe. That was just on my mind. And so then it's like, well, let's go to Spain. What are the options? And the way that I decided was that I think there was a program in Granada and then in Pamplona. I don't know if they both still exist or where. Like
Sevilla. We have Sevilla and Pamplona still, but we've added some.
Okay. So the Pamplona program was the fully immersive one, and the other one was more English, like not. I think it was English and Spanish speaking, but I knew that the Pamplona program was just going to be more immersive. And I talked with someone who had gone the previous year and she absolutely loved it. So then I was just like, yep, all right, easy decision, let's go. And it was incredible. It was so incredible that, you know, I got there, loved my first 6 months. I was only supposed to be there for 6 months. And then when I moved back home, and like within a week of being home, I was like, I need to go back. So I immediately contacted the study abroad office at W&J and in Pamplona and was like, can I go back? Is it possible? Like, I need to, like, I want to be there longer. And we figured it out real quick. Visa, that's a whole other story for another day. I think I flew from Spain to New York for 24 hours and back just to get the new visa at one point. You know, but like these experiences were just so instrumental into who I am today. You know, while I was studying abroad, it was, for me, like I took a lot of generalist classes there. I was able to pick through different things. And, you know, yes, I took like a mandatory, you know, language course and tested into like all of those things. But through like, so I did have like an international cohort of individuals there who were learning Spanish, but then I also was able to live, I found an apartment with 2 Italian guys and a French girl. And so like the stories of like making a fool of yourself, great example. I was the only Spanish speaker going into this group. And I remember like for the longest time, I confused the words pan and sheets. And so like they just trusted me. So we were cooking on our sheets and sleeping on our pans. And it wasn't until one of the Italian guys got a girlfriend from Ecuador that when she came over and she was like, what? What? No. That is not a sartén. That is not las sábanas. And so like fun things like that. And and honestly, just being able to experience so many different individuals from different countries around the world, plus just being in Spain, where it's just, there's so much culture within Spain itself that it was just, like, hands down, best experience of my life.
And you, Korey, you too stayed for a whole year abroad?
It wasn't quite a year. It was a semester and a summer.
Wow.
But yeah, I relate with that story. It took me 2 years to learn the word for socks. I don't know why. It would not stick with me. I don't know why. I'm just like, bueno, las cosas que se ponen en
En los
los
pies.
pies, no sé cómo se llama, pero bueno. You know, like, and they're like, Korey, you speak like you're from Aragon, but you don't know the word for socks. I'm like, honestly.
Oh my gosh.
Anyway.
When I was the first time, when I visited, the first time I was abroad in an English-speaking country was in the UK, and I was in Manchester in the summer, which felt a lot like the fall. You know, I'm a Spaniard from the Mediterranean, so it didn't feel like summer. But I loved it, and I had a wonderful time. But I got a cold, a summer cold. And I went to the pharmacy, and I wanted to ask something that would help my throat, because my throat, I didn't know the word to swallow. That was a very hard one, because how do you mimic to swallow? So I was trying to mimic that to the woman who was selling, you know, meds at the pharmacy, and she was like trying real hard, and I was like exaggerating the like swallowing, and then finally she said, swallow. And I was like, I have no idea, but I think that's the word. So let's go with that. So yeah, there's a lot of that going on. And sorry, Korey, I didn't want to interrupt. How was your time in Pamplona? Was the summer? Were you there spring and summer?
Spring and summer, yeah, that's right. No, and I love these stories. I mean, this is what makes learning a second language amazing, or a third language amazing. No, the word for and I won't go there. Anyway, so we're talking about Korean, but there's a word in Korean that is just, it's hilarious, but we'll maybe at the end. Alpañez, you may be familiar with this. So I lived in Spain when I was in high school. I was super lucky. God, I've been very lucky in my life. But I got really lucky. I got to move to Spain in high school when I was 17, my senior year of high school. And I lived in Zaragoza. And at that time, I was in a fully immersive high school program. And I made some of my best friends ever, like still my best friends ever in that city. And so I actually wasn't planning on going back there. I was going to potentially go to a different Spanish-speaking country in Latin America, or to go to Asia. And I ended up going back because I just missed my friends so much. And so it's kind of a crazy reason, not usually typical of what people choose. And it's kind of the opposite. You're trying to get out there and be adventurous. But I had that adventurous experience. And Pamplona is an amazing city in a part of Spain that you don't think of. So many people think of central Spain and southern Spain. It's in España Verde. And so it's very different than the rest. It's very close to País Vasco. And so
San Sebastian.
yeah, amazing.
Give me the pinchos. I want all of the pinchos.
Yeah, exactly. So it's in the north. It's a completely different place from the south and the central part. And it was an amazing experience. It was similar mind. Like when I went there, I wanted it to be similar to my high school experience, where I was just fully immersed. Make new friends. I maybe went with too high of expectations. I think a lot of people, you go in college, it's a different experience. And I made a lot of friends who actually weren't Spanish. I lived with a Colombian. I lived from Canada. I lived with someone from the Dominican Republic, but grew up in Boston. And I lived with a Mexican American from like New Mexico. And so, but we only spoke Spanish at home. I was like, guys, I don't want to speak English. And like, oh, that's fine, we can do that.
Great.
Yeah, so and that was amazing. It was a completely different experience. All experiences are valid, regardless of how you go there. It's going to be different for everybody. People go there with like really trying to make Spanish friends. It's hard. It's a different culture. People are way different in Spain than they are in the U.S. It's not easy to enter a new country and try to fit in. But yeah, it was an amazing experience. I studied a lot. I ended up staying. I wanted to stay a semester, but I ran out of money, and so I had to come home. But I spent the summer in Zaragoza with my friends from there, and just had an amazing time. Came back. They made me a beautiful video. One of my most vivid memories. I showed it to Alpañez, and she's like, you mentioned you're like, you need to go back, Korey. I was like, I know, it's so hard.
Well, I mean, you'll have to keep, I understand what you were saying about you want to expand your horizons and visit more places, but as a traveler like you guys are, it's very hard when you fall in love with some part of the world because you just want to know it more.
Mm-hmm.
And so, of course, I've traveled a little bit in Spain, not enough. I would love to know my country better. Of course, I love the U.S. I want to travel more here. This country never ends. So, when am I going to visit it all? And then I remember 2 trips. I traveled to Scotland, and I can't wait to go back. I think it was the most beautiful thing I've ever seen, and it's so foreign to me as a Mediterranean. And then I also traveled to Peru, and now I've been to Peru 2 times, and I can't stop.
Amazing.
So look at that.
Amazing.
It's like once and there's so many other countries on the list, but it's like, you just can't help it. And Katie, I totally hijacked your question about study abroad. Sorry about that. They kind of answered, but I wanted to ask you guys. So and we'll give Katie an opportunity for another question. What would you tell a student who hesitates to major or minor in a language? And yes, Clara, you'll be asking questions. Don't worry. I have a question on the chat. Yes, we'll get to audience questions. What would you tell a student who hesitates to major or minor in a language because maybe they hear, oh, you can only be a teacher if you do, Spanish, or if you learn French, you can only teach it. Why are you gonna? So Korey, what would you say to someone who hesitates to encourage them?
It's such a, this again is gonna sound very romantic, but the world is just so much more vibrant and rich if you speak more than one language. I remember when I read Don Quixote at W&J, and the fact that Don Quixote in Spanish had me laughing out loud. Like I was sitting, I think at the whatever the barista, is that what it's called? I can't remember.
Now it's called espresso.
Oh, all right. It was the barista back when I was at W&J. But I was sitting there, I was laughing out loud, and I was like, I just remember feeling this joy. Like I am so happy I can read this in Spanish. And also, in the U.S., we're like you mentioned, Professor, we're very big country, and we're very inwardly focused, and it's really to our disadvantage. And so in order to fully engage with another part of the world and to really understand the world that we live in, I think being able to speak another language is a hugely important tool to do that. And so I would encourage anyone to do it. And in Spanish in particular, like I said, we have millions of people in this country where Spanish is their first language. I lived in Colorado, right? Like Colorado, like New Mexico. I spent so much time in the West with the Forest Service, and I'm like, I can use Spanish more than English in some of these places. And it's, how would you even live in this country? I remember going to Miami with Professor Manzari to do a project, and we just were interviewing, first and second generation Cuban Americans. And it was like, I wouldn't be getting this kind of candor from them if I didn't speak Spanish. And so, I don't know. To me, it's like, if you have the resources available to you and to learn another language at a university like W&J, you are so privileged. And you should take advantage of that because it's only going to help you.
Dan.
I'll just completely echo everything Korey just said. It just opens so many doors to, and I like, Korey, the way that you put it, like it makes life more vibrant. It makes it more exciting. You get so much more by expanding your horizon outside of the United States, outside of whatever city you're in, outside of DC, outside of Pittsburgh. Like you just open so many doors to new experiences that will truly influence who you are as a person. I would not be who I am today if I had not studied Spanish, which had led to all these other opportunities, studying abroad, deciding to go get my master's in international affairs in Italy, in my current career. Like none of that would not have happened if I had not studied Spanish. And so it's like, there's so much beyond just becoming a Spanish teacher or a French teacher. And if you want to do that, there's nothing wrong with it. That's an awesome profession. That is amazing. But there's so many more opportunities outside of it. And being able to put bilingual onto your resume is a huge benefit to you. It's never going to be looked down upon, ever. It's always going to be, oh, great, yeah, actually we have an office over in Mexico City, or down in Peru, or like wherever. And it's like, would you be willing to go down? It's like, you wouldn't have that opportunity if you did not learn Spanish in the first place. And yes, it's a lot of work, but it's still manageable and it's doable as long as you take your time and you plan it and you reach out for help, whether it's from your professors or from other individuals. Like, everybody wants you to succeed, and language will only help you. There's literally no detriment that I can think of to learning another language.
That's awesome.
If I may as well, and I can't believe I didn't mention this, but Puerto Rico, we have I work for the U.S. Forest Service. We're very domestic agency. We do have international programs, but we're mostly domestic with 95% of our work. But we have a national forest in Puerto Rico, and there are public affairs jobs in that territory that I'm not eligible for unless I speak Spanish, like as a second language.
Seriously. Mm-hmm.
Are you ever gonna, work in San Juan for the company you're working for if you don't speak Spanish?
Right?
Yeah, you can't do it. Katie.
Before I just ask this last final question and open it to everybody else, I was wondering if there's any one piece of advice that you could offer to someone who is wanting to major or minor and would be trying to take some of these unorthodox paths that you guys ended up in rather than just this teacher. Is there anything that you would, words of wisdom that you could offer?
I think for me, I would say, don't worry too much about it. I know I spent a lot of time worrying and it turned out just fine. And like, from everyone that I've talked to about, like everybody's going to feel kind of like, I don't know really what I'm doing with my life. Like, you're always going to have those moments. And so again, it's not a detriment and it's only going to be beneficial. And so just really lean into it and just enjoy the ride, to be honest.
Korey?
Yeah, I would definitely echo that. I had a lot of stress and anxiety in college and grad school about quote unquote making it in my career and landing that first job. And it works out for most people. You got to of course, put your due diligence in, but that's huge. I would say, I hope this answers your question, but learning a language in the classroom space, the classroom gives you the tools to really learn in an in-depth way when you are in country. And so, and I say this is coming from single parent, was a construction worker, right? Like, I didn't feel like I was tremendously privileged to have the opportunity to go to Spain twice. It's amazing that someone like from my background could have had that opportunity. But there's no substitute for going in country for a solid chunk of time and immersing yourself in learning that way. And the more you study in the classroom, the better your tools are going to be to really take your Spanish to the next level when you go in country. So I would recommend taking advantage of any opportunity you have to spend a solid chunk of time in a Spanish-speaking country.
Awesome, thank you. So the final question we just had was if there's any way that we could get in contact with any of you, or if students were able to connect with you guys over LinkedIn or anything like that.
Absolutely. Yeah. I'm always happy to talk to previous students, anybody, friends of students, friends of friends. I never turn down an opportunity to learn from other people and to provide whatever resources I can and advice. Not that I promise to be helpful. I can't give out jobs, but, I can give out, advice and, that's just part of it. The networking, the moving down that path is how, the world kind of works.
Thank you guys, because we're recording this, and so we'll post it, and anyone who missed this session and really wanted to hear about this, now knows that they can reach out, and I'll take your contact later by email. So now it's the time. Clara, I know you have a question, and then if Taj or Sierra have one, we'll hear you too. So we're listening.
Great, thank you. Pues gracias por estar aquí. Pienso que sus historias son muy interesantes. I've really enjoyed hearing about your different experiences. Daniel, I think it's so cool you got to do half your master's in Italy. That sounds like a dream. And Korey, I think I'm kind of in your position right now where I am set on being a foreign service officer, but that will probably change and I'll end up somewhere like the Forest Service. I actually thought you were a foreign service officer and misread Forest
Classic. It happens all the time.
But hearing about your experiences abroad has made me quite sad, I would say. I've had 3 abroad experiences now canceled because of COVID. So I guess my question is, what advice do you have for students trying to study languages, given that COVID is a thing and we can't go abroad, because the only real way to learn a language is by being immersed in the language and the culture? Because I'm feeling quite stuck at the moment. I can't go to Spain and increase my Spanish skills. I can't go abroad to an Arabic speaking country, but I wanted to know your advice.
That's a great question. Dan, do you want to take it first? Do you want me to go first?
Sure. After you.
Okay. Yeah. And thanks for bringing it up, Clara. That's really important. And I wish we'd been a little bit more sensitive to that reality. It's easy to forget in the confines of our apartments and things as we work from home. But yeah, that's a real thing. We will get through COVID. We will get to the end of the line on this. This has put huge wrenches in so many people's plans for things and opportunities. With that being said, we may be getting close to the end. I don't know, in the next 10, 12 months, however long it may be. Look for those opportunities once we're through this. But also, again, millions and millions of Americans speak Spanish. And so there may be opportunities in Pittsburgh to get involved. There may be opportunities to, go and seek places in your community where you can speak Spanish. And don't be afraid to. I mean, we're always like that kind of awkward person in the corner being like, I want to speak Spanish. When it's natural to do so. And don't, again, you're going to feel awkward and it's going to be awkward, but that's really the only way to get better. So take advantage of all the resources available to you at W&J for sure. Do not miss those up, because when you leave W&J, people don't give that stuff out. I mean, they're not giving it out now at W&J, let's be honest, but they don't give it out anyway. So take advantage of the opportunities you have at W&J for sure, while we wait for this thing to kind of, for us to get through it as a global community.
Yeah, and I definitely agree with that. And I think, trying to find those opportunities when they are available, and like Korey mentioned, like both within the United States or, volunteer opportunities, whether it's with a church or, whatever, like there's so many, diasporas of individuals around the country, as well as abroad when we're able to, that, even if you're not able to go for that semester, there's ways to interact with individuals. And even at W&J, finding time, and Alpenia's not trying to put time on your calendar right now, but being able to speak with native speakers, not about classwork, just to go have
live.
So anything else, that's when you learn the most, because it's the small little things that you don't learn in the book and don't learn in the classroom. And it's to ask for a drink, you say, oh, ponme un café. That phrase, doesn't, it's not yo quiero un, it's so different about these little colloquial phrases and things that you can really pick up from just talking to native speakers in Spanish. Those sort of opportunities.
Yeah, I was in New Jersey not long ago. I was in I can't remember, somewhere near Elizabeth, and I went into I was like, I kind of want Peruvian food. I went in and the restaurant was 100% Spanish speaking. They say, I was striking up a conversation with the waiter, and he was like, "Are you from Spain?" I was like, no, not at all. But it's interesting because there are opportunities, and so we're gonna have to be a little bit creative.
Yeah, and to answer that question, Clara, I'm happy you echo this frustration, because believe me, we professors are so saddened by the fact that we didn't have any international program in the fall, and we're not going to have any international program in the spring. And I'm so keeping my fingers crossed for fall. I hope that by the time fall 2021, by the time you start applying for visas for fall 2021, that this situation is more under control, to give an opportunity to those who are, still have time to travel then. Because I appreciate what you guys said about truly W&J is an excellent place to get opportunities abroad. And I don't know that all universities and colleges in America are the same. So this is really something that we should take advantage.
Yeah, and one thing I would add too is that when all of this opens up again, which it will at some point, whether or not you're able to go on a dedicated program, just traveling, even on your own, is such an eye-opening experience. Yes, the fully immersive 6-month year experience is the ideal, but the reality of our world is that like that might not be the case. And so just hopping on a plane and going and exploring, and I've done it a few times where I've just done solo trips, have been some of the most influential trips of my life to interact with people around the world, whether it's in a country where you're trying to learn the language or a country where you don't speak the language. I've had some of the most fun experiences. I went to China by myself and just like romped around, and it was like I learned so much and met so many incredible people and was able to start learning language in ways that I never thought that I could.
That's awesome. And we also have a question from Taj. Taj, do you want to ask your question?
Well, first, sorry, I'm in the car with my mom. She's on the phone. But I would like to say I really appreciate like hearing you guys' story. And I also wanted to ask, like, how long did it take to learn Spanish? Because I really want to learn Spanish and I plan on majoring in Spanish. But I'm overwhelmed and scared as far as like memorizing and just immersing myself in the language.
Yeah, I mean,
I think that was kind of a question, but I don't know. Sorry.
I think that's a totally fair, fear to have. Like, how long is this going to take? Well, like it's a different way of thinking. It's hard to put a time on it because I still feel like I'm learning. Like there's always more to learn. I'd say it definitely, like, again, like I don't want to put timelines on it, but it takes a few semesters because like to have your baseline, because you'll learn the basics, you'll learn the ins and outs, but then all of a sudden there's always another level to go up to. And you're always just going to constantly be changing it. So, to get to that baseline, I think the Foreign Service actually, like, they put Spanish on one of like the level 1 or level 2, where it's like, about a year to get like a baseline understanding of like being able to converse and get your way around and order in a restaurant and all of those things. But it's always going to be more. Like you're always able to learn more, if that makes sense.
And I think it's also, Dan was getting to this. It also depends in what capacity do you want to use the language. So if you want the language to be able to travel and navigate with a certain ease, Spanish speaking country, I would say that's the first level you get to. And you can get to that level maybe already when you are in the 200 level. Definitely 300 and 400 you would be comfortable. Now if you want to have Spanish as part of your job, obviously that takes a lot more time, and it takes being immersed abroad, having the opportunity to be immersed abroad, because that just like jump starts your learning so fast. So it really depends. It's a question also of what you want the language for. And I want to agree with what Dan was saying. Learning a language is a life path, and you just say like, cool, I'm here, throw things at me. You have no idea. I started learning English when I was 12, and you have no idea how many things I learned every day, and like, well, in pronunciation, let's not even, because I thought I had a perfect pronunciation, and every time I discover I don't, it's like, what, I don't sound from the US, apparently. I thought I had it. So it takes forever. I learn new words every day. And the trick, I believe, is to not be discouraged. If you like it, just keep doing it. If you sound weird, oh well, who cares? Just continue. And I think you'll get there. You're the only, my mom is 62, I believe, and she started learning English 2 years ago. And she's not immersed, except when she comes and visit. And she's like doing her little exercises, and she's actually getting better, even if she's, an older adult. So you can do it. It'll just take time. So what? You keep leaving and do your thing. Katie, how do you feel about it? You're at the 300 level now, almost finishing the 300 level.
I'm currently in 411, which is...
Oh, look at that. You're already at the 400 level.
It's my first 400 level, and I still struggle so much. Like, I will admit entirely, I still find myself like totally at a loss. but I've made a lot more friends recently that do speak Spanish, and it's definitely taken a lot for me to try and get over that hump of embarrassment and just be like, just talk to me,
Just say
just speak
things.
to me, and I'll try to speak back. But hopefully that's kind of the only outlet I've had, since I'm not going to get that travel abroad experience. I travel as much as I can, but it's still difficult, and I want to say it's been getting easier, but it has not.
It's honestly, for it to get easy, you have to be there for years with the language. But eventually it happens, I can attest. At one point it just happens. And of course, if you're immersed, it goes a lot faster.
Yeah, I'm waiting for that day.
It will get there. Thank you so much, Korey and Dan. This has been so fascinating. Thank you, Katie, for assisting me. Thank you, students, for attending. What a wonderful evening. I'm going to let you go and enjoy the rest of your evening, not taking more time from you. I'll be in touch with you guys by email. I'll send you the link when we post the video. Thank you, Katie, for your work. Have a good evening, everyone.
Thanks, everybody. It's been a pleasure.
Thanks,
Thank
everyone.
you. And is there a
Thank
way to
you
get
so
in contact
much.
with you guys?
Oh yeah, Taj, I'll share the information when they give me either email or LinkedIn. I'll share it with you, no worries.
Thanks. It's been a
Okay,
pleasure,
thank
everybody.
you.
Yes,
Have
thanks,
a good night,
everyone.
guys.
You
Bye.
too.
So good to see you.
Take care.
Likewise.
Thank you so much for this opportunity.
Thanks, Katie. It was great
Bye.
working with you.
Bye,
Bye,
everyone.
guys.